That's so funny. It's weird. It's just like, right? Is that nothing? You're like, wait. Right. That's so funny. So it's just, it all falls into place. It all falls right.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Okay.
All right, did we do it?
Yes.
Do we have sound?
We have sound. There's that. It's not the best sound, but people can hear you and everything. So
why don't we?
you can always put it closer to them. Yeah. Here. I'll put this sound right here if it's okay. It might.
Maybe I should speak into.
Can you? Yeah, you can speak into the mic.
I should speak into the mic.
Yeah.
When you're looking at my stomach. Here, I'll sit in. Hello. Okay, we still have some people on Zoom.
Great.
They're still out there.
Okay.
Right.
Are they
I'll
coming
be
in or are they
back.
gonna form?
They're doing Tai Chi.
Immigration.
Okay, so I'm happy to say, dealing with services too long,
You're doing it with the
and this is still not working. Here, I'm gonna tilt it up. So service is too long, and we've got stuff not working, and Tai Chi, and sending people to the wrong place. We are here. I have met these two extraordinary women at a Faith Votes. What's that? It's on for Zoom. Yeah.
loud.
Met these extraordinary women at a Faith Votes event, and I just said, would you just come be with us, be amazing, be brilliant with us, because we need you to help us be smart about these issues that are so important to everyone in the world. Signed out. Uh-oh, it says signed out. Is there a reason it says signed out?
Where'd she go?
You know what, I'm gonna just keep going because you've been waiting so long. I'm gonna let our board member, Lauren Levin, introduce these folks because she's got a longer connection to them than I do.
Good Yontif, everybody. I'm Lauren Levin, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to Jeannie Kuttner. Back a long, long time ago in 1986, Jeannie and I clerked for the same judge, Charles Weltner, who was a real civil rights legend. And now she's very active in voting rights and doing a wonderful job. Next to her is Sherry Frank. Now here's what I want to tell you about Sherry, and I don't want to start crying, but nobody has done more for civil rights in the city of Atlanta than this woman right here. Certainly since John Lewis has passed away, she's taken the mantle, and she's done tremendous work. She's co-president of the National Council for Jewish Women. I encourage everybody to get involved in that organization. She is tremendously experienced, as is Jeannie, and they're going to be speaking about voting rights and reproductive rights.
Thank you. I'm going to go first, talk about voting rights, changes and challenges since the last Senate Bill 202, the last voting rights law in Georgia, and the opportunities to be involved. And I have a short anecdote, which goes back to 1986, but I don't know if you were in the office then. In 1986, there was a primary, and in Georgia it was a one-party state then. So the Democratic primary was it. And I was going to be out of town for the day of voting, and there was no early vote. You could only get an absentee ballot if you were going to be out of town. So I had dutifully sent off for my absentee ballot. It didn't arrive, and there was nothing else to do. I went to Fulton Superior Court, and they said, "So sorry." So Judge Weltner showed me how to do a writ of mandamus to make the Fulton Superior Court give me an absentee ballot to fill out. And I did, and I had a judge, Isaac Jenrette, who I now adore, but he was one of the very first African-American judges in the state of Georgia. So I had this mandamus to give me the ballot because I didn't get it. And there was no way to get it in those days. There were no computers, no nothing, no way to do it, no voter protection hotline. So he finally realized I was never going to stop talking. So he gave me the ballot, and he said, "What can it hurt? It's only one vote." And so that's sort of my theme. And that was the election that John Lewis won the primary by this much. He eked it out so that he didn't have to be in a runoff, and that started his illustrious career. So I think it was more than just one vote. I think it was important. So I was trying to think about the sort of the draconian law that we have now on the books, which doesn't make it that hard for you to vote, but it has some really horrible parts to it that affect the whole system of voting in Georgia. But what happened was I was trying to figure it out, because in those days, there was no early vote. Absentee ballot was only if you were out of town. In 2005, when the Republicans took over the state government, and this is, I tried to get an objective source, they initiated, early vote came a little later, but they initiated absentee ballots that I think they were intended for Republicans. You didn't have to show any ID, but you did if you voted in person, which seems like really unfair, especially with all the complaints later. But that's what they instituted. We had early vote coming up in 2011, and I think the legislature tweaked the laws every year. But it's sort of with a lot of things. I think Stacey Abrams probably figured out how to get people to do, in 2018, to do absentee ballots. And there was a flood of ballots. And we had some bad things then. Not all of them were by state law, but we had an exact match requirement for if you were going to do an absentee ballot, if you had a hyphen or you didn't have the whole name, your application would be rejected. We had purges in the rolls of the voters, very massive purges. And the other thing we had was long lines at the polls. So in 2018, I think that is why, this is just me talking, that Stacey Abrams said that she did win or she didn't lose, because there was so much going against her to come that close with all of these draconian measures. She filed a lawsuit with Fair Fight about a few days after that election. It just got resolved a few days ago, not in Fair Fight's favor, but in the state's favor. But in the meantime, organizations like Fair Fight, like the ACLU, a lot of other voting rights groups, and the legislators who were elected in 2018, who were more Democratic and would fight the Republicans on some of these issues, they winnowed down some of the really bad parts of the Voting Rights Act that was in place then. I think it was 2244. So they did away with the exact match. We don't have that now. The long lines, was it 2018 or 2020 in the primary where we had the horrible long lines? Because we had the new voting systems that somebody had told them were really good, but we had those. And the voter purges, that got ameliorated. And then there was an administrative action that just sort of went under the radar, where people were automatically registered to vote when they got their driver's license if they were 17 and a half. So all of these things were better. So even though we lost the lawsuit, Fair Fight lost the lawsuit, the changes had been made in the interim, and there was a lot of evidence and a lot of testimony. So the Republicans who were fighting for the state made some of the things better. So now I've got this brochure that says it's really easy to vote in Georgia, and it kind of is. We have different ways to do it. We have, from 2020, we've got changes since then. In May 21st, 2021, I can't imagine what precipitated this, but they came out with this law, SB 202, which could have been worse, but which the Democrats and these lobbying groups helped ameliorate, so that we have early vote, and it's now codified in law, so they can't take it away. And it's one Saturday or two Saturdays. In the metro counties, we've had all of this anyway, but it's got a lot of early voting. And with absentee ballots, you have to fill it out, you have to have photo ID, you have to, if you have a driver's license number, you have to have some ID that they can verify that you are who you say you are, which is something that they didn't do when it was just Republicans voting. You have to do that. There's a new form, and the application requires a wet signature, which just means you can't do an electronic signature, but you can still scan it or email it. They've shortened the timeline, which is not all bad. And they've limited the drop boxes and the mobile voting, but those things only came about as an emergency measure during the pandemic. We didn't have those before. And the fact that we don't have them now is not good, but it's not the worst thing. There shouldn't have been such an expectation of that. They changed the provisional vote, and in 2018 and 2020, there were a lot of people who, they kept changing the precincts. So if you went on election day and you were in the wrong precinct but the right county, you could vote on a provisional ballot, but only for that which you were, not your little local thing. So you can't do that anymore unless it's after 5 p.m. But you can,
And then it doesn't count.
yeah, but you can't, if you're in the wrong place, it doesn't count. No, you can, if it's after 5 p.m., you have to sign an affidavit that you don't have time to get back to your precinct. And if it's the wrong,
Take a look and see, because I was told on a call that even if you fill out a provisional ballot after 5, it will not count. They're
it's-
letting you fill it out. If they're
we
not
don't
gonna
know.
count.
It's supposed to count, but that's only on election day, but I'm going to get to what you can do about that in just a minute. But some of the good things are that the early vote was codified, that poll watchers are now, have to be trained, and it's 3 parties, only parties can be official poll watchers, and the poll workers are getting better trained. But it's the big systemic changes that are draconian, that doesn't really affect the voters in any particular election. They've taken the Secretary of State out of the mix. He used to be in charge of the State Elections Board. And the General Assembly really has charge because they have appointed one nonpartisan chair, and it's William Duffy, who was a federal judge. He was a good judge. So he's considered the nonpartisan judge, the chair. Then the Democratic Party chooses one, the Republican Party chooses one, and the other 2 of the 5 members, one is chosen by the House of Representatives in Georgia legislature, and the other is chosen by the Georgia Senate. So that means those are right now effectively 3 votes for the Republicans. Now, if we ever get the legislature back, and that's where voting comes in, but that's the way it stands. And there's all these things about performance reviews and independent performance reviews for the county election boards, and I know they were aiming for Fulton County, not DeKalb, but Fulton County, to take over the things. But I think after the Coffee County debacle, they may back off on that, because that one needs to be investigated first, if you're familiar with that. It was in the news where they discovered in a lawsuit about Dominion voting systems that Sidney Powell had let people in, and she had contracted with someone, and the local election people let them come in and copy things that they weren't entitled to. So there are these provisions that are bad. They haven't been tested in the law yet, in challenges. The other thing that's really bad is that there are mass challenges. Any one person who lives in a county can just challenge thousands of people saying they're in the wrong address by looking at different things. But there was just an article that 22,000 of these votes they were challenged, but the challenge was dismissed. So there's a hope that with people like Fair Fight, New Georgia Project, ACLU, and other voting rights groups that are numerous, and watchdogs and legislators, that these kinds of things will be tempered and not as bad as we think they will be. There are opportunities to get involved to try to help this process at every step. You can volunteer with any of these groups. You can, anyway, we did a lot of voter registration, some of these groups, especially New Georgia Project. I'm involved in it's the Democratic Party's Voter Protection Hotline, and I would recommend that to anyone, because that's how you learn. We get this big manual, and you learn what to tell voters and how to help them. They call in, and you go through the My Voter page, which is essential to know how to find My Voter page Georgia, and then you find out if you're registered, where your polling place is, what your status is. If you're elderly, which is over 65, you could ask for an absentee ballot for the whole cycle, and you can tell if that shows up in the My Voter page. Or we can call the county election officials. We need poll workers, we need poll watchers, and I'm a poll watcher during early vote and for election day. And it seemed to me in 2020 that my primary job was making sure the Republican poll watchers weren't intimidating and harassing voters and poll workers, which is what we had not seen in the past, but which was happening. They'd walk around with clipboards, and you knew who the Republican poll watchers were, because they were looking for problems. The philosophy of the Democratic Party's voter poll watcher is you want to make sure everyone who's eligible gets to vote. And so if they have a problem, you can't talk to a voter in the in the voting area. But you can find out, and we can call the hotline, and we have other tools. We have this thing called LBJ, which means Lawyers Bound for Justice. It's not the president. To call up and report a problem, and there are people waiting in what they call the boiler room, attorneys who can help solve problems immediately. What problem we're anticipating.
Can you talk about the difference between a poll worker and a poll
Yeah, a poll worker is a hired person who has to be there probably 6 to 10. And I think they can sign up for early vote and election day, but it's got to be laborious, and they got to see people after people after people. And I have a bunch of those forms here if you want to do it. To be a poll watcher, you sign up with one of these groups that's doing it, and I'm doing it with the Democratic Party coordinated campaign. You have to sign up there with a party to be a poll watcher. But it's boring, but I love it because you really see what people are doing, although you can't really you're not supposed to look at the ballot screen. The poll watcher is observing, cannot talk to the voter, cannot interfere, but just make sure there's no problems. And there's often an outside poll watcher, so that if a voter is turned away or told to get a provisional ballot or any other things, we can try to catch them not in the voting area and find out what it is, call the hotline, try to resolve the problem. We've also got a team this year called Ballot Cures. Some people were having their absentee ballot applications rejected, and this team was calling them back if we found out about it and trying to fix it. Sometimes it was just the wrong address or some other minor thing. But sometimes people are told they aren't registered to vote, and I can look in my voter page, but there are more sophisticated tools that they have, and even more sophisticated tools that the elections offices have. And the elections offices will kind of take a call from the hotline quicker than they would from probably an individual calling. But all of those things you can do. And also, if you can't get out, calls, text, postcards, all of these things help get people to vote, getting people out to vote, which is of course central, because it may be only one vote, but it could be very important. There's also a post-election process, which I participated in 2020, which was kind of fun. There were recounts, there were audits. I got sent up to Walker County to look at one of the audits, just to let them know that someone's there watching, and that to try to hold them accountable. That was kind of scary because the deputy sheriff there was saying, this thing is all sideways, this election. And I said, oh, you mean in this county? He says, no, nationally. So I called my son in Alabama to come with his gun and get me. I mean, it's scary what was going on, but that's why we got to be there. Also, the ACLU has a program, I think it's called the Peanut Brigade, Peanut something, to go to Board of Elections meetings all over the state as much as we can cover, because that's where if you show up, you know what's going on, and that's where a lot of decisions are made. When you think about supporting candidates, you think at the top of the ticket, but down ballot is where everything is really happening. The Board of Elections in the counties, the county commissioners, they're having more and more influence and power. There are some groups, and the one I'm familiar with is Win something. It's a women's group trying to get candidates to run and support. Georgia Win List. But there are plenty of them, yes.
I want to bring up a point there. I was at the National Convention for the NAACP, and they were speaking about down ballots.
Yeah.
Because a lot of problems that people do not understand what their jobs are.
Yeah.
And they said they would go into a group and ask them, would you vote down ballot? And they say, no, it's not that important. Then
It's
they read
critically
each
important.
role, what they did.
Yeah.
And then they asked them the question again. It was like a 90% improvement because they do that. But I'll also ask you now, I live in Alabama, so I vote there.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
Oh. No. No, I'm not a war eagle either, but that's,
You have to be one or the other.
no, I'm a King Magnus, Texas. But anyway.
Welcome to the South,
I was
Rabbi.
just going to say, welcome to the South. Those words just-
Now we're talking real religion.
I have a son who lives in Alabama.
But the funny point is like when you were talking about poll watchers,
Observers. We can say poll
Yeah.
observers.
observers, watchers, whatever you want to call them. And I noticed that one certain party would sit up there, and I know now I'm a poll inspector, so it ain't gonna happen under my watch. But they would come stand over the shoulders of the poll workers
Yeah. Well, that's
But
what
I mean, like the, and it was like, they didn't intimidate me, but, I mean, stupid stuff like, we have groups that will pass out who to vote for. A guy comes to my table, I'm getting him signed in, and he leaves that sheet on my table, and they're automatically writing up, calling their paper. Oh, somebody, I'm like, did you give me time to even throw it away? So when you talk about poll watchers, even if you are somebody about doing right, you want to report that poll worker, a watcher,
Yeah.
not worker. Because I know I've been through every stage, like in Alabama, and the stuff that people are accused of, if you go watch how they count ballots, even absentees, how they count provisional ballots, it is so straight up. I don't know how anyone could ever say.
That's why we all need to be involved at whatever level is comfortable, whether it's writing postcards, supporting candidates, supporting some of these organizations like Fair Fight and others. I'm just using them because I'm familiar with them, or ACLU, yeah?
I have a comment on that about doing the vest and I've been volunteering since March. It's a Democratic organization started by a Jewish Hollywood guy that did this after Trump won in 2016. I won't mince words on that. And their main thing is registration, but
Yeah,
but
but-
I do all other phone calls too.
Yeah.
And they've commented that, like in the how important it is. I don't feel bad that I call a lot of people on the phone and I might get some hang-ups and then I really do try to talk to people, is that like Biden won Georgia in 2020, that they statistically say just by 5 votes per precinct. And I know I called for a gentleman up in New York that ran on a one-issue deal on the abortion issue. Same thing again. He won by a very small margin to try to get people to vote. And the apathy thing is what's happening a lot of times, but.
And that's what we have to work on.
SealTeam6.org, if you're interested in any of, not just Georgia, other states where registration is still out there, like Florida or whatnot, they really need people to call and phone bank because,
I want to just add something about the absentee ballots. They're not easy, and you have to have access to a printer.
that's it.
And this last week, we had volunteers with the National Council of Jewish Women at the Jewish Tower, and High Rise is trying to help people to fill out the applications because it's not easy. So, if you have kids out of state at college or, family members who are not going to go to the polls, help them fill out that absentee ballot. It's not easy, and
No, and that's, we're there to help, but we also tell some of the people, ask a family member who's younger to print it out for you.
Why don't we
Switch on.
to Sherry
I
and,
was gonna move there.
well, just, so point it towards, just swing it, yeah. And then we'll finish with, the materials you have and ways that people can get involved. 'Cause I'm assuming a lot of people in this room are already registered, so do it.
You have till October 11th, which is next Tuesday.
Right, so I think it's how we do the Jewish justice work, that's so proud that you guys do, as Jews.
Okay, just to begin with a quick story. Years ago at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, there was a film called The Law. It was a French film, and the minister, and it was a story about the Minister of Health in France who was Jewish, was a survivor. And in France, they won the right to have abortions. And at many times at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival, after a film, there's a great discussion. And there was a wonderful discussion, and I had this aha moment, why didn't I ever think about it before? And one person said the problem with the United States is we fought abortion as a legal issue rather than a health issue, which was wow. And now that you see with the abortion ban, you see how devastating it is as a health issue. So I brought a lot of material. I brought a Jewish perspective on abortion, a Jewish perspective on voting rights. Jeannie has some voting rights stuff. And I brought 2 things that I thought were interesting. One is a piece that the National Council of Jewish Women put together, and when I looked at the date, it was 2001, and it's called Benchmarks. And it's just amazing that even 22 years ago, it was created to preserve Roe, with the idea that there could be presidents coming into office that were pro-choice, pro-life, who would appoint judges for life that were pro-life.
Mandatory pregnancy.
And, so it's just amazing when you read, I hope you'll pick this up and read it, because it could have been written, yesterday. And so one of the things, again, with this whole idea of words, the way we are now phrasing National Council of Jewish Women, but I think all of us who are supportive of abortion access, is to speak in terms of reproductive health rights and justice, just not, the legal case. And it's, I think, really a good piece that I hope you'll pick up, and we have plenty for you to bring back. But just, quickly, protective health deals with the woman or the person who's pregnant. Reproductive rights deals with the individual right to the health care, and justice deals with the law. But all of these are part of the whole package. So just, a little bit of background to think about. And so just a variety of issues where we are, what we've done just in the National Council of Jewish Women. For decades, we've been working on this. We've been doing education programs, we've done marches, we've signed petitions. A lot of you have done a lot of that. A couple of years ago, when we really saw how possible it was that Roe would be overturned, we sponsored a film called Jane, an Abortion Story, and it's an amazing movie that tells the story before Roe of what people were doing. And this Jane really created an apartment, trained people, and they were doing hundreds of abortions a day. And we charged a nominal amount to come and see the film, and the money we gave to the ACLU for their first legal case against the bill.
It's a documentary, I think it's on Netflix.
Jane, Abortion Story. It's really amazing. The woman who really managed it was not Jane, and she's another Jewish activist who's historically wonderful. This past spring, we saw, yes, Heather Booth. This past spring, I said, let's just keep the issue alive, before the Supreme Court votes, just to keep people wary of how dangerous the territory was. And so we said, maybe we should bring the film Law back. Most people hadn't seen it. We discovered there was an award-winning film that won international awards, and it was called The Happening. And we showed it this spring, and it was in Atlanta for a few days, but that's a film worth seeing too. It's really scary and has shades of what people will turn to when they can't get abortions legally. So where we are, we all know that the Supreme Court reversed a 50-year precedent. It's a violation of religious freedom. What's happened since is a chaos because people just don't. What?
Can you explain your second point with a couple of sentences?
We didn't argue that.
Okay, I'm going to get to it in a minute. Because for Jews, this is a religious freedom issue that we are guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution. I'm going to get into it a little bit deeper. In Georgia, the privacy language in the state constitution is stronger than the U.S. Constitution. What the Dobbs did was say, go back to your states to deal with it, so that we are involved in a process to challenge it on a privacy issue in the state. But the chaos that's kind of happened in the last 3 months is from state to state, you don't know what's happening. We thought, while we were challenging that we had a 20-week ban in Georgia after the Dobbs decision. Now we only had the 6-week ban. 7 states now have bans in effect, and several more are in the process because they're in the courts. The Georgia bill, which people say don't call the heartbeat bill, call the abortion ban bill, is numbered 481. So you'll see that it kind of becomes your vocabulary like the voting rights bill. The 6-week bill is in place now. And when you think about them waiting to see if there's a heartbeat, what's happening is there is electrical collectivity in the cells that will ultimately become a heart and other organs. but there's no heart. Rape and incest are in Georgia, if you're raped or if you've been violated, you can get an abortion, but only after you go to the police. And then the whole privacy issue comes up because of all your medical records and whatever. Some people have told the horrific stories doctors tell about the tubular or ectopic pregnancy that, you know, anybody in medical school knows you don't let the sun set on an ectopic pregnancy. And there are horrendous stories where, you know, a woman's in a hospital bleeding with this tubular pregnancy and the doctors are on the phone with lawyers for 8 hours while she's just about bleeding to death to know if they can actually take care of this woman. That is an exception in Georgia. If it's an ectopic pregnancy, they can terminate the pregnancy. What's interesting is in Georgia, the prosecutors are saying they're not going to prosecute the doctors or the pharmacists or anybody involved, but the Republicans are about making stronger laws that will punish the people who do do this. Georgia, among the many things, when I talk to my colleagues in New York, and I'm in Washington, particularly after the last information on Herschel, was like, what in God's name is happening in Georgia? I mean, you know, we were just standing from the rooftop shouting when we got 2 senators passed, and now it's like, good God, you know, the voting rights bill, whatever. And now we have the proud title of being the only state with a fetal personhood law. And that's now in effect in Georgia. Welcome to the South. And if you're pregnant, then it's like you're two people because the fetus is a person, and you can claim a $3,000 deduction on your taxes. That's in place now.
And use the carpool lane.
What?
And use the carpool lane.
Yeah, the carpool, you can ride in the carpool lane, you know, and say that there are two.
They're forcing every department to define what that is. Dentists won't, they told a patient, we were able to get this dentist kind of reprimanded, but he told a patient that if he worked in her mouth because she was pregnant, that he was going to charge her double.
Oh, God. You know, back to this rape and incest thing, we know that 75% of rapes are not reported. So, you know, that loophole is going to affect so few people. Medication, most people having abortions today are having medical abortions. They're safe. The process, the drug is called mifepristone, or some people refer to it as RU486. It's a process of taking one pill in the doctor's office or the clinic and then taking the second pill at home. It creates it stimulates the uterus to contract, which is the process of miscarriage. And then there's some bleeding and some cramping. What's interesting today with all this virtual medicine, it's one benefit from COVID, is people are able to get online and get help walking through the process. This is not legal. It's being done. And of course, it's particularly being done in red states. There's another drug, and it's pronounced methotrexate. And when I was writing my notes about it, I was just amazed because last night on the evening news, there was a story about a 14-year-old girl who had rheumatoid arthritis. This is the drug for cancer, for arthritis, for things like that. People are not prescribing it because it can.
They're scared.
Because it can create a miscarriage. It's dangerous in pregnancy.
They're scared they're going to get that it's going to be a criminal act against them.
Right. And this, on TV, they said this 14-year-old, the pharmacist, the doctor who wrote the prescription, the pharmacist who was trying to give it to the child, was on the phone with lawyers, and it took hours and hours, and this particular child, for this child, it was a life-saving drug that was necessary. So, you know, the ramification, you know, of all of this is just devastating. So where are we with litigation? The ACLU, Planned Parenthood Sister Song, and Lisa Haddad, who's a gynecologist, who's the plaintiff in this, have filed suit with Georgia on a privacy issue. we, NCJW, has been in contact with ACLU. We have the legal special team nationally who can file a privacy case. This is the kind of case you don't want to lose. You don't want to have precedent. So they basically said to rabbis, don't talk to, the good lawyers in your synagogue who really want to do something with this. This is very specialized. It's one of the things we've got to win when we take it. We are in contact, in conversation with NCJW and the ACLU in Georgia to possibly file a suit based on religious freedom, but we're not there yet. But as I was preparing for this, I always make myself crazy because I want to make sure that I have every answer if somebody asks a question. And so I called Andrea Young at the ACLU and said, is there anything I should know? I'm speaking at Beit Havarim, and she said, yes, Friday, I talked to her yesterday. Friday, Attorney General Carr, on behalf of Kemp, has asked the judge for a delay. On October 24th, the folks that are filing this suit based on privacy have asked for a hearing, and the judge has granted it on October 24th. And now Carr and Kemp have said delay it till after the election, which is politics. So as I'm writing my notes and Andrea is talking, she's saying, they like the bill, they passed the bill, they support the bill. Why are they concerned with it being in the public arena, being talked about now during elections? And so I said to Andrea, so why aren't you doing an op-ed? And she said, since we're one of the folks filing the litigation, we've been involved not to, but somebody else could. So I picked up the phone and called National and said, will we jeopardize our tax-exempt number if we get involved in this? We're not getting involved in the race, we're just simply getting involved in the hearing and the discussion of an issue in Georgia, and they said, go for it. So we are in the process of writing an op-ed, and we were down to the point that we had sent it, our team at NCJW sent it to Andrea to just make sure we had any quote of the Georgia Constitution or the court status not correct. And so I sent her the draft, and she didn't call me back in an hour, and I said, what's going on? And she said, we're working on this on a lot of cylinders because Carr has sent an email, but not something that's legal, that's part of public record. So they're waiting for that to come in before we try to get an op-ed in. But we hope that we can do what we can to make sure that October 24th hearing continues.
It's the Judge McBurney, the same judge that has.
It is the McBurney.
He has the grand jury for Trump. He's the best judge in Fulton County.
So we have a very, very hard stop at 3:40.
Okay.
Given 8 more minutes. So I did want to talk about the religious freedom issue, which I could do, or do you do it
We'll let
as
you-
fine? And then we do want to make sure people have.
And let me just, one last thing,
Yeah.
because we think this is so important as a religious freedom issue and a Jewish abortion issue that we support, we've nationally created Rabbis for Repro. Rabbis, one of our rabbis, we have 40 rabbis signed on in Metro Atlanta. These rabbis have signed on to say they'll teach and preach about this issue as a justice and freedom issue. We also know that the one time that the Torah text specifically deals with this, we've designated as Repro Shabbat. And last year, almost every synagogue in town had some kind of program around this, and we hope that, you'll do it this year.
So I'll just say real quick, there's the one Torah text which says that if two people are fighting and there's a miscarriage that's caused by it, it is not what we normally have as capital crime of murder. It is specifically says in the Torah that that's not a capital crime. In other words, a fetus is not the equivalent of a human being. I think really powerfully, the rabbinic texts say there's this idea of a rodef, somebody who's pursuing someone else to hurt them, right? So, like, if I'm going after Lauren and I'm going to hurt her and I could kill her, then, I need somebody, someone come and stop me, up until the point of killing me, right? Preventing me from killing somebody else, right? You have to be, you have to not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor, right? So if I'm going to do something horrible, you have to stop me up until the point of killing me. The rabbis call a problematic pregnancy, in that case they call the fetus a rodef. If the fetus is threatening the life of the pregnant person, you have to, it's a mitzvah to perform an abortion. And it is in very graphic language, and I apologize in advance, but it says up until the point of childbirth, this is in Ohala, in the Mishnah, you cut up the fetus in the womb and take it out limb by limb. And why is it so gross? Why do they have to do that? I think they're making a point, right? That even when it's repulsive to us, we take the life of a human being over the life of a potential, possible, maybe human being, right? And we always know, we know that so often these are women or trans folks whose lives are valued as less anyway. It's the tragic truth. That's where we have to say this is a gender rights issue, this is a healthcare issue.
And we
And
have
a
a,
re-
and
and a
we
religious
have a
issue.
wonderful
And if
piece
you
on
say-
it from a gender
So if you say
perspective.
if you say that a fetus is a human being or a heartbeat makes it a person, a personhood bill, that's limiting Jewish religious freedom. So there's your religious freedom point of view. And let's talk about how we get involved on voting and on this issue in 4 minutes.
How we get,
How does this congregation get involved? How do we do what we need?
you know, the bottom line is vote. Get everybody, you know, everybody's got to vote. If we vote, and if we get a change, we'll get Roe v. Wade.
I like this quote, that we're not a red state or a blue state, we're a who shows up to vote state. I think that's pretty important, and canvassing and all of that, but getting people, everyone you know, to vote, to actually go and vote. We can do all of these other things too, to help before, during, and after, but everybody has to vote. That's-
And if people want to ask questions about this, you know, share them the material. We've got good
You want to tell us
material.
about the material we do that? Just so we can make sure people
This
know
is a
what.
two-pager on how to vote and make it, how to make it easy, and I think we handed some out. Sherry's got Judaism and abortion, understanding, and the one she talked about, understanding repro health, rights and justice from a Jewish perspective, and this one about, you can take all of
Hand
these.
those out and then leave them at the table.
Yeah, and we have a voting in Judaism, which you support the community.
The key is to be informed and get people to vote. You know, somebody said in one NCJW section, there was a real effort for grandparents to take grandkids. And there was this sense that the kids don't listen to their parents. You know, what do parents know about their grandparents or another thing? So I have worked to make sure all my grandkids are registered, that, you know, it's grandparents and kids vote together. But it's vote, 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 vote. Be informed and understand this from a legal issue, a justice issue, a human rights issue. I mean, every day we hear these people whose lives are threatened because of this bill.
Where do you sign up to be a poll watcher?
I can, if you.
There's material here on it and the ACLU.
Well, the Democratic Party, you have to be in a party to be a poll watcher, to be an observer, an official one, that you get
Okay.
trained by the state. No, that's the worker, I have my email address, and I'll get you the thing to sign up. You have to do, you can do some training online.
If anyone has, I am so sorry that we ran late, so this started late. I'm going to
But we're leaving you lots of
give you a
material.
round of applause. You are inspiration.
The rabbi get the first hug instead of the